So don't bullshit me and say that you think you know what you're talking about. You've never served. You don't understand how this works. We care about performance in the military, period. You don't know what you're talking about. Most of the people in this room don't know what they're talking about. We need lethality in the military.
Hey, fellow patriots. Welcome back to the channel where we speak the truth, defend American values, and stand up for our Constitution. Today, I'm fired up because what I just watched in this congressional hearing is exactly what's wrong with Washington, D.C., and the radical direction some want to take our armed forces.
Full access to reproductive choice and to health care. Now, who do you think is politicizing the military? Is it Senator Tuberville with his anti-choice agenda, where he wants to dictate to all of the women of the military what their access will be to health care? Or is it those women themselves? Are they the ones that are somehow perpetrating a woke agenda by saying that they want to have equal choice? And don't we depend on women in the military these days? Last I saw, it was something like 18 or 20%, even in the Army. So please answer that if you would.
Yes, I would say that Senator Tuberville created political pawns out of those general officers. We have a non-political army, and we're one of the few countries in the history of the world that has never had a military coup d'etat, and it's partly because we are non-political. And yet, Senator Tuberville created political pawns for a policy he disagreed with. I couldn't disagree more with him for doing that and hurting our force and those general and flag officers.
The military also depends on lots of African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans. That's just a reality. You might love it, you might hate it, you might be ambivalent about it, you might just accept it. But in any event, that's the reality, as I understand it. And in any event, the Army decided that it wanted to rename military bases that had been named not after U.S. generals, but after Confederate generals who joined the Confederacy in rebellion against the Union. So, like Fort Benning was renamed after a pro-Union, pro-American general. Fort Gordon was renamed as Fort Eisenhower. Fort Hill was renamed as Fort Walker. And yet, I take it this is part of the big anti-woke arraignment and indictment of the military, that we have renamed military bases after pro-Union, pro-American soldiers, generals, people who've been loyal and faithful to the Union, as opposed to those who have opposed the Union and took up arms against the Union in traitorous insurrection. Now, who's politicizing this question? Is it the people who go along with the Army's decision to say that's who our bases should be named after, pro-Americans, or the people who are wanting to stick to the old Confederate battle names? And I'd like you to address that, and also Mr. Lohmeier, I think you've taken the position against changing the names. Yeah.
Well, remember that the names were changed, Congressman, because this body voted overwhelmingly, overrode the veto of President Trump to create the naming commission, of which I served as vice chair. It was my proudest moment to rename those after true American heroes and not those who chose treason to preserve slavery.
Thank you. And do you agree with that, Mr. Lohmeier?
I'll say that it's my view that Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has politicized the military. As soon as the Supreme Court decision was made, he issued a policy memorandum blaming the Supreme Court's decision to reverse Roe v. Wade on the recruitment.
But I'm asking about the naming. I'm asking about the naming of our military bases. If you don't want to address it, say you don't want to answer it.
Yeah,
but I understand
I walked Black Lives Matter Plaza yesterday with a Chinese American.
Yeah, I didn't ask you about that.
No, I'm answering your question. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And she advocated.
Is it okay, Mr. Chairman, if we go over here? Because
for leaving those
the witness wants to
no, I'd like to answer more than yes or no questions.
We can let him answer the question.
Yeah, I can let him answer, because I wasn't quite done yet, but now he's occupying my time. If you want him to answer it, that's fine. So yes, about the renaming of the bases after pro-Union, pro-American generals.
Thank you, Mr. Raskin. I'd like to answer that question in more than just a yes or no format.
Okay.
I walked the Black Lives Matter Plaza yesterday with Xi Van Fleet, Chinese Maoist Cultural Revolution survivor, and I had an interesting conversation with her in which she advocated, I'd never thought about this before. And by the way, I don't address this topic in my book. I wrote about Marxist critical race theory. She said, I'd recommend that once we defeat wokeism, we leave all of the Black Lives Matter paint on the ground and the signs naming the streets. I asked her why. She says, because it's a reminder that once here on the north side of the White House, we had a woke revolution, a Marxist revolution take place, and I agree with that. It's a reminder that there has been such divisive conflict in this enemy before that people were willing to use violent force to hurt one another. I have no problem with the general's efforts.
If I understand you correctly, I'm trying to torture out an answer, but what you're saying is that we should have army bases named after Confederate generals or Nazi generals, people we've defeated in war. Is that right?
I'm not willing to let you put words in my mouth.
We're about 2 minutes over here, so we're just going to let Mr. Lohmeier finish, and that's it.
So my point is, this is not an issue in which I've actively been involved. The renaming of base. I wrote a book about Marxist DEI, Marxist critical race theory. That's my expertise. I have no personal issue with the fact that this gentleman to my left, who honorably served his country, has been a part of a commission to do that. I have personal opinions about why it's wrong-headed and a part of an ideological push, but this is not my
So
issue.
you would not have renamed them, in other words?
Well, we're
Point of order.
2.5 minutes
That's not
over.
something I ever focused on.
All right, I think I got my answer,
It's not
Mr.
something
Chairman.
I've
I'll
ever
yield back to
Go
you.
for Mr. Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the witnesses being here today. So, Mr. Lohmeier, when we look at some of the things that have been said by the gentleman to your left, and I don't think I can pronounce your name. I want to pronounce it right.
Sigilly.
Mr. Sigilly, yes, thank you. And I've read your testimony. I'm interested to know your reaction to his positions with regard to the diversification of the military
Sure.
and DEI.
Thank you. One point that the general made with which I disagree is that diversity is our strength. I don't think there's any evidence for that, but definitions matter. Words matter, and we're losing touch with this. I would reject the notion that diversity is our strength based on DEI definitions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Merit-based, okay, I'm going to get away from that because if we're trying to find a unity of understanding, let me say this. Skill and performance matter in the military if you'd like to deter conflict and win our nation's wars, period. As a commander in the military, I had a black colonel fly across the country to promote me to lieutenant colonel because I loved the hell out of the guy and respect his views on the Federalist Papers, which he was teaching me after work hours, and because he was the best leader I've ever worked with. The best airman that I had working for me, incidentally, was a transgender airman. So don't bullshit me and say that you think you know what you're talking about. You've never served. You don't understand how this works. We care about performance in the military, period. You don't know what you're talking about. Most of the people in this room don't know what they're talking about. We need lethality in the military, period. All of the stuff you guys talk about, the men and women in uniform don't think about. They go play Call of Duty at night after they learn their mission and execute that mission, period. They don't know what you're talking about. They don't know what you're voting on. They don't care about your sexual preference. They don't care what you look like, and they don't care what the person next to them looks like, period. I'm a citizen of this country, and I can dislike you and criticize you all I want here, but our men and women in uniform cannot. And so I speak on their behalf when I say lethality matters, merit-based selection and promotions matter, and your ideology doesn't matter one bit. And we need to identify principles which will preserve our union and preserve the unity of the United States military. If we do not, we'll lose that union. And it's my contest, whatever Truman did decades ago. No, you ask your average military service member when Truman was the President of the United States, they can't even tell you. But my point is, they're focused on what's happened since the George Floyd riots. There are things that have happened in the last 3 years in our military that we're up here to testify about, not the things that happened 60 years ago. We're great today because of what we've done for the last half century in the fighting of the Cold War.
And Mr. Lohmeier, what has happened in the last 3 years that has caused lethality to deteriorate in the military?
There's been an overt politicization of the military workplace and the forcing of trainings that are anti-American, that criticize our founders, that allege that white supremacy is a problem within the military ranks, which has never been proven, and all of that rhetoric that occurred once Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin took office. led to a bunch of moaning and bitching and complaining behind closed doors of our service members, and I heard it as a commander. And so I wrote a formal written IG complaint about it that was dismissed by senior leaders because they were afraid of the political and racial climate that we've created in this country. And so they were afraid to hold one another accountable for their politics. Senior leaders. So they're not held accountable for their political worldview, but young people will be held accountable. I'm living evidence and a living example of the fact that the diversity initiatives are discriminatory. I was kicked out for saying I'd like to depoliticize the workplace, not for advocating for Republicanism, or excuse me, small r, Republican, not for advocating for Republican candidates, not for criticizing Democrat candidates. I never publicly advocated for anyone politically, but I was forced out because of viewpoint discrimination. Diversity initiatives are discriminatory, and inclusion initiatives are exclusive of my viewpoint.
So,
And so I'm living evidence that the politicization of the military workplace in the past several years is discriminatory, and it discriminates specifically against conservatism and Christianity, period.
Mr. Chairman, I want to submit for the record something called Declaration of Military Accountability, an open letter to the American people from signatories of the Declaration of Military Accountability into the record.
All right, let's start here. We have politicians attacking Senator Tuberville for simply standing up for the rights of the unborn and holding the Pentagon accountable for their radical, woke policies. Since when did protecting innocent life or defending traditional values become politicizing the military? Wasn't it the Pentagon that decided to intervene in state laws and push controversial policies on every service member, regardless of their own beliefs? And let's not forget, this isn't about denying health care to women. It's about the federal government forcing every American taxpayer to fund things they fundamentally disagree with. That's not freedom. That's not choice. That's government overreach, plain and simple. Now, onto this whole business of renaming our military bases. Look, I love America and I love our history. You don't erase the past by tearing down names and statues. You learn from it. But the left wants to rewrite history, pretending that every American hero who fought for their state, for what they believe at the time, deserves to be erased. It's not about pro-union or pro-American. It's about dividing us, tearing us apart, and sowing shame in our own country. These bases weren't named to celebrate treason. They were named as a gesture of national unity and reconciliation after a bloody civil war. Erasing those names is just another way for the radical left to virtue signal and tear down our traditions. And here's the real heart of the matter. This push for diversity is our strength. Folks, let me be clear. Diversity for the sake of diversity does not make us safer or stronger. Lethality, readiness, and unity do. I served with men and women from all walks of life. We didn't care about color, gender, or pronouns. We cared about who could perform the mission. The military is not a social experiment. It's not a college campus. It's a fighting force that needs to be ready to defend this nation at a moment's notice. When you spend more time on DI workshops, unconscious bias training, and pushing political agendas, you take precious hours and energy away from what matters: training, discipline, and mission success. One of the witnesses nailed it. Skill and performance matter in the military if you'd like to deter conflict and win our nation's wars. Period. Amen. That's what every real service member knows. The only color that matters is camouflage, and the only thing that matters is who can get the job done. You want to talk about discrimination? Here's the truth the mainstream media won't tell you. Today, it's conservative service members, Christians, patriots, who are being targeted. If you speak out against woke ideology, you get punished, demoted, or kicked out. Don't believe me? Listen to the testimony. Men and women who served honorably are being pushed out because they refuse to go along with the left's political agenda. That's not inclusion. That's indoctrination. They claim to fight for diversity and inclusion, but what they really mean is conformity and exclusion. And if you don't agree, you're out. The military should be a place where every American who loves this country and can serve with honor and skill is welcome. Period. Not a place for political litmus tests. I get it. America's military has changed over the years. We ended segregation. We gave women and minorities the opportunity to serve, and that's a good thing. But what made those changes work was that we focused on unity, not division. We found common ground in love of country, not in obsessing over our differences. So here's my message to all Americans who love this country. Don't let the radical left destroy the greatest fighting force the world has ever seen. Stand up for merit. Stand up for unity. Stand up for the men and women who put on that uniform. Not to be social experiments, but to fight, win, and come home alive. It's time to get politics out of the military. Bring back discipline. Bring back readiness. Bring back the pride in serving the United States of America, not some woke ideology. If you agree, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with every patriot you know. Drop a comment below. Let's get this conversation started. Together, we can save our military and our country. God bless you, and God bless America.